there was an article in Politico that was saying that DeSantis is now 26 points ahead in Florida and 20 points ahead in Georgia, as opposed to he only led by 7% and 6%, respectively. And it's really interesting that then, in the article goes on about, well, if Trump announces, it's going to ruin, and they should just back DeSantis because he's going to be the most popular one, so why don't they just support? Now, we stopped filming because it was literally at the point where we're about to talk about politics that Trump started his announcement. And we stopped, we listened to it, and I have to say that my comments on this from a leadership perspective have shifted slightly, Dr. Rod, because at first I was going to say, well, shouldn't Trump just step aside? How do we as a leader know when to kind of charge forward and when to champion others?
That's a really good question. And I think in the case of President Trump, a lot of it has to do with his personality. And, we've talked on a couple of occasions before about him, and I've said a couple of times, of course, that I think he lacks wisdom. And certainly that was the case when he intervened when he contributed to the runoff elections in Georgia after the 2020 elections. And I think probably that's what cost probably 2 seats in the Senate. So I'm a little bit ambivalent, but like you, as I listened to his speech, I thought this is probably, if not the most statesman-like speech he's presented, it would have to go very close.
Yeah.
Now, if he was able to maintain that kind of presence, then he would probably win over a lot of voters.
Yeah.
And might, in that case, be a good choice. But if he kind of reverts to the highly self-focused, accusatory kind of person that he seems to have become following the election in 2020, then I just don't think that's going to serve the purposes of anybody particularly well. But certainly listening to that speech, it was in many ways quite inspiring.
Yep.
But look, one thing that I think is for sure and certain is that there's going to be really, shall we say, energetic opposition from the left.
Yeah.
And we need to watch that pretty closely because that could do a lot of damage to America, not only to their economy, but to their society as well.
Let's not be critical of the person. Let's be analytical of the behavior. We actually find it really interesting that the day before midterm elections were about to happen, Donald Trump doesn't announce. He just releases a statement where he teases that there's going to be a special announcement next week or a big announcement next week, whereas obviously we assume he's going to announce that he's going to be running for president in 2024.
Yeah, my thoughts when I heard what President Trump had done was, look, really this is the last thing that is needed at this point in the campaign. And the reason is that Donald Trump is polarizing.
Yes.
And there'll be people who may have been thinking about voting Republican who change their minds. Now, we won't know that for sure. There may be some post-vote polling that is done that might help us come to understand that a little better. But the problem is Donald Trump is a polarizing influence. He has a hard core of very strong supporters. Then there are those who would rather him just retire and kind of fade away, as it were, and put all his energy into his presidential library or something like that.
We often as leaders get too caught up in the vision and forget the people. And we think that the people are just there to serve us to achieve the vision. No, like Jesus said, I've come to serve, not be served, right? The vision is not yours, and those people are not there to serve you and your vision. God has given you a vision, and you are leading the way, but there's also other people that God has called to that same vision that happens to be aligned with you. And we are there called to then serve those people, build them up, and encourage them. Let's talk about building people up and encouraging our team that it's not just about the vision. Let's talk about Trump. So there was an interview with Trump recently on News Nation that actually aired on Tuesday, and this was his quote. "Well, I think if they win, I should get all the credit," Trump said in an interview. "And if they lose, I should not be blamed for it at all. But it will probably be just the opposite."
You should support your people.
Yes.
One aspect about being a good leader is you go in and defend your people.
Mm-hmm.
It's really important to do that. Now, I've done that at personal cost to me. In fact, I made a decision once that I'd have to leave a job because I was then working for someone who was the owner of a business. I was running the business, but I was running it on their behalf. And I made a decision which was clearly a decision to protect staff. I defended staff, but that, of course, brought me the ire of the owner. But I thought, no, look, part of my role as leader is to, as it were, to stick up to defend my staff,
Mm-hmm.
which I did at personal cost to me, and I did eventually leave that job.
If we win, it's because of the team. If we lose, we need to take our responsibility, stand up, and protect the team. Because, well, let's be honest, no matter how good we are, we couldn't do it without the team. No matter how good we are, and no matter how bad the team is perceived to be, we still couldn't have done it without their help. And so if we won, it's because of the team. If we lose, we do need to take accountability. Some of the biggest news over the last 24 hours is Trump being arrested. Well, him forecasting that he was going to be arrested, and it's been on the news cycles all day, and I've been watching it all day. Obviously, I'm here in the Dominican Republic, so I'm on a different time cycle than Dr. Rod. He's in Australia. He's only sort of just gotten up for the day, and so I've been watching this all day, expecting to come into this podcast to talk about Trump being arrested and what that means and all this stuff, and it kind of became a non-event, but it was probably the biggest event of the day. The truth is actually revealed in our actions. Right, like there's always, we can talk the talk.
Look, the American political system is broken, probably not because of its structure or of the heart, where so many positions are elected. I think that goes right to the very heart of the Christian underpinnings of the Republic. But there's no doubt that the almost removal of civility in public life in the United States has done enormous damage to the Republic. It really has. I think it's the people rather than the systems that are the problem.
Today's theme, I really want to talk about leaders standing united, because I believe that God has called us to be united. God has called us to link arms with each other. You know, iron sharpens iron. We are better together. We aren't created to be silos. We are created to do life together. You know, looking at the discipleship model, we're better together. You know, so everything's united. So I really kind of want to theme today around how the power of leaders that stand united.
Poor leadership damages people, and ultimately it will impinge upon our capacity to actually fulfill our vision. So while it is important for us to unite around the vision, the ideas, and obviously as Christians, we're all united around Jesus Christ, the central figure in our faith, that can never be used as an excuse for poor leadership.
Never.
Yes.
And as
Yes.
leaders, our attitude should be, I am going to grow, I'm going to receive feedback, and I'm going to ask for input, and, I'm going to allow the Holy Spirit and wise people to lead me to become a much better leader. So regardless of what anybody might say about the power of unity, there is never an excuse for poor leadership.
A few weeks ago now was Trump's Republican town hall presented by CNN. And I don't know if you have actually seen it. In looking at these interactions, Dr. Rod, what would you say would be the standout thing that you noticed from Trump? Former President Trump, I know you like to use titles. What would you say would be the standout thing that you saw from former President Trump that made his response to criticism something that we can learn from?
Well, he didn't allow himself to become flustered. So
that's very
despite
good.
the fact that he was seemingly under attack for most of the interview, he didn't get angry, he didn't get rude, he didn't get flustered, and he continued to make the points that he wanted to make. But the fact that he remained very calm and he was clearly well prepared, and he didn't allow the badgering by his interviewer actually put him off course. So she was never able to break him. She was never able to trick him. She was never able to get him to say what she wanted him to say.
Make sure you know the facts, both for and against, because that's the only way that we are able to truly respond to critics and actually genuinely silence those critics is through facts. It's happening. We thought, would this actually happen? Would DeSantis actually run? He's governor of Florida. Will he run for president? Well, yes. The answer is yes. He announced it on Twitter the other day, and well, he's now going up. So now it is Trump versus DeSantis. Dr. Rod, how do we still speak against what's going wrong while still having respect?
Look, I think the best way is to focus on ideas and issues rather than persons and their personalities. And I think Ron DeSantis does this very, very well indeed. Although, look, Donald Trump was quite reserved. I mean, he didn't really let loose all barrels at one time, which is a little different to the past in the case of both the Republican Party and the Democrats. Usually these sort of skirmishes leave people quite bloodied, metaphorically.
This launch that DeSantis has done, he's done it because he believes that there is a better way. But maybe if Trump believes that he's still got unfinished business, hopefully they can have an ongoing, how do I say, hopefully they can build along the way and not tear each other down too much and just look at that bigger picture. Well, let's talk about one of the biggest news stories that's happening with leadership and the courts is Donald Trump being sued for everything, right? I must admit that I have a weakness, a fault, or what, I don't know what you would claim it to be, but I do have a tendency. I can get over familiar, over comfortable with some people that you think that they're ride or die. You think you're best friends and everything like that, and so how do we draw that line? How do we draw that line because it's quite commonly spoken about, be friendly but not familiar. That kind of statement.
I think that as leaders, our objective shouldn't be to make friends. Now, I know that doesn't sound too good, but I was reading an article by another pastor actually yesterday, looking at the difference between leading and entertaining. And if you see yourself as a leader, but your main objective is to have as many people following you as possible, then you're probably not a leader. You're probably an entertainer. And I think the same thing applies to friendship. Building friendships and leading are just not the same thing.
That's good. Mugshot has just gone viral on both sides. It's really interesting. This mugshot is a classic. Dr. Rod, what's your take on these mugshots, this reaction from his team to just be a spit in the face of these accusations, so to speak, and just laugh at the ridiculousness of this situation? What's your take on the team's response here?
Oh, look, it's pretty hard to make much of a judgment on their response just by the photos. I imagine they were quite nervous at the time, and I sometimes laugh if I get too nervous. So, it doesn't surprise me all that much that some of them had smiles on their face. I don't know that we should read too much into it. The leader needs to build a fence at the top of the cliff for him or herself and for the people who follow him or her, rather than hope that there might be an ambulance at the bottom of the cliff.
Yeah. So I feel like this story really leads us to kind of understanding that we as leaders need to make sure that we are prepared ourselves, even for situations that we may not know, but make sure that we're prepared and can handle the things, make sure our team are prepared and handle the things. And then when we're in the middle of something, make sure we're not stepping out and putting too much pressure on ourselves so we break down and we fall apart. Make sure we're not exceeding our limits, and make sure we're not exceeding the limits of our team either. Otherwise, everything's just going to fall apart. Controversial topic, I know. And yes, someone who himself seems to be a walking contradiction. If you look at any of his comments, any of the stuff that he goes through, you can find a lot of contradictions, and it just seems to be his personality. A story came out that one of the judges that is hearing his case, this judge has been found to be financially supporting those organizations, and now he's residing over this court case. Dr. Rod, is that a contradiction? Is that a conflict of interest? Like I know that obviously in a legal sense, yeah, okay, the legal sense, it can be a bit of an issue. But in general as well, is this right?
Absolutely not. Very clear conflict of interest. If it's not an actual conflict of interest, certainly potential and perceived as well. And the only right course of action is for Judge Sarah Wallace to recuse herself from hearing the matter. Cut and dried, absolutely no room for debate whatsoever.
Now, how do we then lead them if we have differing viewpoints on something that's kind of irrelevant to what we're leading? Is understanding the purpose of what we're working towards. I think that's the key, is when you're leading someone that has different viewpoints or different culture or whatever, if you're leading them, find the common ground, which is usually the outcome or the project that you're working on. What's the purpose of that? And see how you can both integrate into that and focus on what brings you together, and focus on leading them in that aspect rather than focusing on things that pull you apart, as long as those things are not mission critical.